Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Diego the Podcaster's bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Real people, real stories, really on Wednesday. Available now on YouTube Music.
Warning. The following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
The borders of space and time have opened once again. And transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's time once again for Let's Find Out with Diego. The universe is waiting for you. Wake up and remember.
On this episode of Let's Find Out, today we will dive deep into the fascinating worlds of myth and legend. We're not talking about traditional vampire lore, Dracula or Anne Rice. Instead, we're journeying to Proxima Centauri B to explore the mind of our guest and his book, Planet of the Vampires. Forget Transylvania, we're going Interstellar. All this plus more. Please welcome our good friend and author of the new book, Planet of the Vampires, Keith Evans. Keith, my friend, welcome back to Let's Find Out.
Thanks for having me.
Happily have you. I saw a link. Well, actually, no, I saw a social media post about Planet of the Vampires, and you sent me a link on my Instagram instant message, and like, I gotta check this out because Keith always write really good stuff, and now this is a second book related to vampires, but we're gonna get into that here in a little bit because I think you're onto something here. Before we do that, I've been seeing a lot of videos of you. I know you keep busy. Every once in a while, you still send me some videos. You've been doing an awful lot of paranormal investigating so far because I see your meter. I see you have some equipment. So what have you turned up lately?
Well, I've been doing paranormal research at the Magnolia Cemetery in Apalachicola, Florida. And this one little grave, it was fairly new. If they're fairly new, I usually don't do them unless they're like 1920 and before. But I was trying to draw to this little grave, and I was getting some really, really high millimeter readings as far as milligauss for the electromagnetic energy. And it just said baby Page. And the death date was the same date as born. And I thought, that's sad. So I went ahead and did paranormal research there. And I also noticed between baby Page's grave within this family plot, the baby Page was right on the end of the family plot. There was only like room for maybe 4 or 5 people. And on the, between baby Page and the other tombstone, there was like a grayish white angel with the wings out, like it was flying, So, and at first I didn't even notice it. I was just looking at the tombstone and thinking about how sad it was that this little baby died on the same day he was born. And, and how the parents must have just been devastated. So anyway, I started asking questions. And one of the questions I asked, now this was right before I turned the Obelisk 5 on. And it's often been said that your first 2 words on the Obelisk 5 are just like an analyzation of the background of wherever you're at. And those words should not be taken very seriously. But sometimes I get words that are answering my question within the first 2. So the first 2 words were really nothing interesting. It just seemed to be more like analyzing of the actual environment from the Obelisk 5. But the third word that almost came back to back, all 3 words were kind of rapidly in concession, and it said Robert. And my question was, to baby Page, if he would have, well, it didn't really say he or she, but if they had lived, what would they have liked to have been called? And I got the word Robert. So, and I was so interested in that. And also my batteries on my C5 thermal camera went dead. So I did not get any thermal imaging of the angel, which was yellow. It was the warmest thing in the frame of my C5 camera. It was yellow. Even though yellow for that day, since it was cool out, it's probably no higher than in the 70s, 74, 75. It was the same temperature. It was the warmest thing in my frame. And what the C5 does, C5 thermal camera does, if the hottest thing in your picture frame that you're looking at, your sight vision on your screen is 75, then that will be yellow or white, which is your hottest color. And then whatever is coldest in your frame, say like the tombstone, the shiny part on the rim of the tombstone is like 64. And that's the coldest. And that will be a dark purple, if not kind of like blue. So that's your colder colors. So anyway, I didn't get any of that for the actual Paranormal Short Session 39 that I put on my YouTube channel called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans. So I wanted to go back there and at least do a walkabout and walk by the grave and see what I picked up. So this time when I walked by the grave a week later for Paranormal Short Session 40, which is a walkabout, and I call it the walkabout with David Page, Robert Page. I'm sorry. So anyway, I was walking around and I had walked away from the grave and I got actual C5 footage. My batteries in my C5 did not go dead this time. So when I walked away from the grave, I think that Robert Page was walking with me because I'd asked a question, what is your name? That's one that I like to ask because I feel that you get the same ghosts of spirits when you go back to the same place that are keeping an eye on you. They just may not chime in. They might let somebody else talk and they just watch or listen. So when I asked, what is your name? I got 2 words that seemed to be, this is when I first turned the Obelisk 5B on. And I got 2 words that seemed to be the background registering with the Obelisk 5 that didn't seem to be an intelligent answer. But the third word was P-A-G-E, Page, which was the last name of the baby on this tombstone. And it also was I took a little video of the family plot, which is P-A-G-E, Page. So that's 2 weeks in a row. I at least got one intelligent answer from the Obelisk 5B. And I also got numerous electromagnetic readings on my Mel meter, which shows that there's paranormal activity going on because there's no electricity. This is a large graveyard, and there's no electricity running back through there, and there's no electrical wires. There's nothing that could trigger the Mel meter to read any type of electromagnetic energy. It'd have to be some type of geology event going on where it's picking it up from the magnetic impulse coming from the earth, or it's paranormal coming from a ghost or spirit or something we just can't identify yet, which I thought was just gonna cause viewers to go wild. And believe it or not, the last 2 weeks viewership has not been that great on YouTube. So I don't know what's going on.
Well, it's not just you. It's been happening to me as well. But going back to what you were talking about, that's very remarkable that you got a direct answer as soon as you asked the question. Normally, in these investigations, it doesn't go quite like that. How soon after you entered the graveyard, turn on your equipment, you started asking the questions, how soon after that did you receive your answer?
Well, the bottom line is I'm one person and I do my paranormal research alone. So I use equipment and then turn it off. And sometimes when I start out, I use the Mel meter because if I can find a place that has electromagnetic readings, usually the paranormal is good. So I started with the millimeter, and then after that, I switched to the Sci-Fi thermal camera, and then I turned that off, and I switched to the Obelisk 5B. So I didn't get to the Obelisk 5B until I do promos ahead of time. I do 4 promos and I do 4 extras. They're usually anywhere from a minute or less, and the extras are usually maybe 30 or 40 seconds. So I put those on YouTube and Instagram so that I advertise my YouTube channel on YouTube. And so it was right after I turned it on. When you first turn it on, like I say, I asked a question before I turned the Obelisk 5 on, because the ghosts and spirits, they're in the atmosphere, they're in the environment, so they don't need to listen while the Obelisk 5 is on. So I asked a question, turn the Obelisk 5 on. The first 2 words the Obelisk 5 gives you is kind of like a piece of equipment initializing before it actually can be accepted as a ghost or spirit. That's what they used to say. Sometimes I get intelligent answers within the first 2 words. Sometimes I only get 1 word. So, but this time it looked like I got the first 2 initializing words, which didn't really answer my question at all. They weren't names. I think one was STND, like Stan. So it could have been someone saying my name is Stan. And if they're a bad speller like me, thank God for spell check, I mean, maybe it was a name. And I was spending my time on that, because when I get a name, I usually thank you, Stan, for giving me your name. Because I figured, hey, it could be Stan, give the benefit of the doubt, and not standing up like you're standing instead of sitting or laying down. And then I looked further, and I had another word, which definitely wasn't a name, the second word. Third word was Page, Page, and that was the last name of the baby who passed away on the same day that they were born. So I knew that ghost of spirit was still, at least around me to ask questions. And I think that's pretty cool when you have a baby that passed away in 1948, and they're still monitoring their grave, and they're still. I believe in reincarnation, so I don't think everyone who passes away stays a ghost of spirit forever. I think a lot of people who passed away maybe in 1948 might be reincarnated and living today. Maybe not as a person, and maybe not on this planet, but there's some place in the universe reincarnated and living as something. It could be a bird or an animal or even a fly, who knows. But so anyway, I still feel that Baby Page is still in a spirit form, and that he still monitors his grave. So that's pretty cool.
Maybe Baby Page is not ready to cross over yet. He's got some work to do still on this plane of existence, perhaps.
Well, I think ghosts of spirits can go and come from the afterlife to here. I think they're free to do that. I really don't feel there's any crossing over and you're not coming back. It's like, to me, it's like a 2-way road, and they can go and come as they like. Once we pass away, all we are is electromagnetic energy, and electromagnetic energy can go almost the speed of light. So they can travel great distances very fast. If a ghost or spirit sees me driving towards the graveyard, they could probably be there in a matter of seconds, no matter how far away they are, if they're traveling the speed of light. And they probably wait and see if I come their way. And if I don't, they probably move on. If I do, they're ready to give me some intelligent responses to my Obelisk 5B. But that's the first time in a long time that I've really got direct answers that were intelligent responses 2 weeks in a row from the same tombstone area and the same person and name that I've identified as Robert Page.
And during the course of your investigations, if you don't mind me asking, Keith, because I think we talked about this right before we started, you go out there and do this by yourself. Now, is there a reason why you explore by yourself? Because I can understand sometimes it can get quite chaotic with a group of people, and not everybody's has the same mindset, perhaps. But why do you do it alone?
Well, I do it alone because I think it allows the ghosts and spirits to feel comfortable. I don't think the ghosts and spirits like a big production company and cameramen and producers. I don't think they want to be treated like a sideshow. The same way if I had passed away, I would rather have someone interview me with a small camera, camcorder, or a cell phone video camera and just keep it like a one-on-one conversation. And most people in their lives, once you pass away, you have the same emotions that you would have when you were alive. There are very few people that want to be in a crowd or feel comfortable talking in a crowd or in a situation where there's more than one person. And ghosts and spirits are the same way. So I think my paranormal is better because I do it alone. But I will say there are downfalls. If I had a team of like 3 or 4 people, we could be gathering. Some person could just have the millimeter. Some person could just have the Ovilus 5B. Some person could just have the C5 camera. And then as a team, they could work together. And you could have footage from more than one location. Like say, if I have a camera going, another person could have a camera going 180 from me. So not only are you seeing in one situation what and who I am talking to or what and who I am facing, but you would see me as I'm facing that tombstone or that full grave cradle. And so it would be nice. And, it has its positive to have more than one person there. But I really feel that if you're there just to communicate and having one person makes it more of an intimate type setting where most ghosts and spirits feel more comfortable talking to you and communicating. And I always tell them before I start, sometimes before I start with the camera, because I've had ghosts and spirits tell me you're being redundant. And I guess they feel like if I'm on camera too redundant too often, people will tune out. So sometimes I do my whole thing before I turn the camera on. I say to ghosts and spirits, hi, my name is Keith Evans. I'm going to be taping this. It's going to be on YouTube. I'm going to be doing short videos and photos. They're going to be on Instagram and also on Facebook. So sometimes I do that before I start because I think the ghosts and spirits didn't want me to be too repetitive because people at home don't want to see the same repetitive speaking every time. And they might just say, well, I don't want to watch him. Half of his beginning is just talking to the ghosts and spirits and explaining everything to them. I think people want to see you trying to obtain data. So, but that's what I do every time. And I think if the ghosts and spirits know where you're coming from, then they can choose whether they want to communicate with you or not. And I don't feel that all ghosts and spirits will communicate with me. There's some people in life that can't stand me. So I'm sure there's
my word.
ghosts and spirits that can't stand me either. So if a ghost or spirit doesn't feel comfortable with you for whatever reason, they're probably not going to communicate with you. That's another reason if you have 3 or 4 people, well, there might be one person that they do feel comfortable with. And if you have a group, you can say send one person in at a time. You don't have to have everyone there at the same time, even though there are advantages to having everyone there at the same time, because then you could get, say, if you're there for an hour or you're videotaping for an hour or a half hour, I find for YouTube, your videos that are 20 to 15 minutes will get more views than your videos that are longer. So I try to keep most of my paranormal short sessions down to 15 to 20 minutes. And if you had 4 people and they all had 4 different instruments, then you could be getting readings from 4 different instruments, not just, me doing it for 20 minutes, using this instrument for 5 and turning it off and using another instrument for 5. So it might even be more interesting for people at home. But I have never really found too many people that I felt comfortable with most of the people who have wanted to do paranormal research with me were people who are like empaths. And I'm somewhat an empath, and I don't get enough at all to really talk about. But some people might have a stronger empathic abilities than I have, so they might be able to zero in. So, but as far as finding another person that's just truly into the paranormal research side by using equipment. Now, for instance, if something happens, like maybe 3-4 weeks ago at the Magnolia Cemetery, I was near this tree, and my arms, both arms from like the elbows down, started to itch intensely. And I do have allergies to trees and grasses, but they're usually not that bad. And I thought, well, maybe this tree had some type of poison or something that was releasing pollen that might have just landed on my arms and itched really bad. So if I pick something up like that, it's probably not empathic. It's not just something that is picked up in my mind. It's something physical that's going on. So if something like that happens, then I let the whoever's watching on YouTube know about it. But I feel that is less reliable because it's not an instrument that's picking it up. It's me. And anyone off the block could just claim something is happening, something is touching them, something's grabbing my foot, something's this, something's that. You could just make that up if something gets boring. But I'll go ahead and I'll document it because my arms were itching more than they would ever itch if I had allergies. My allergies are mainly around my eyes, my eyebrows, my forehead, and the top of my head. And it'll just itch like you know what, but never my arms. So I found that to be interesting. And I actually went back a second week and I had the same thing happen, but not as strong. And I think a lot of times the electromagnetic energy of the ghost or spirit, that itching might just be their electromagnetic energy being very close to my arms. Ghosts and spirits are just, they were living people at one time. And if you're happy to see someone, you'll go over and shake their hand or whatever. So maybe this electromagnetic energy of this soul who's a person who's passed away was just coming over and shaking my hand. And maybe that's what caused my hands and my arms below the elbow to itch. So, and a lot of times that the ghosts and spirits know that their electromagnetic energy is having this effect upon you, they might try to lessen it so you don't itch so much. So the second week in a row, I went back to that location and I had the itching, but not as intense. And I think at that point in time, I was just doing a walkabout, so I didn't stay near the tree during the whole paranormal short session. I moved on. So, but it would be interesting to see if you had 3 or 4 people in the group, does that happen to everybody? And when they walk away from the tree, does the itching stop? For me, the first time, once it started itching, it pretty much itched during the whole paranormal short session, which might have been maybe 25 minutes at the longest. The second time I was there, it started itching when I walked up to the tree. And then when I walked away, it quickly stopped. I'd say at least 5 minutes later, no itching of the arms at all. So, which was good because I don't like to itch.
Nobody does. You just answered my question. I was going to ask you, how long did that allergic reaction last? If you take any medicine, but it seemed like it went away once you left far away from that tree.
Yeah.
So, that's good on you, actually, because I'd hate to something like that to last a long time. I hate allergies; they're terrible, and
It may have not been an allergy. It might have just been the electromagnetic response that my body had to having the ghost or spirit close to you. Because a ghost or spirit, what I call a soul, SOUL, is just a small pocket or package of electromagnetic energy, very small, smaller than the human eye can see. So when that is close to your arm and, trying to shake your hand like a human being would, even though, ghosts or spirits can't really physically interact with you too much, like to actually shake your hand, but I think that's what caused the itching. Had it been more allergic reaction for grass and pollens or tree pollen, I think it would have lasted longer than what it did. So I think it was caused by the ghosts and spirits. And I don't think it was caused to be negative. I know a lot of people think if something goes wrong and it itches them or touches them, that it's trying to hurt them. I don't think it was that at all. I think every ghost and spirit brings their own electromagnetic energy and their own way of interacting with human beings. And if you just let the ghost and spirit know that that's causing my arms to itch, they'll back off enough so that that doesn't happen, especially if they want to talk to you and want you in the area.
Kind of like people who are allergic to animals. The animal's not doing anything bad to you, but if you pet them, you get a certain reaction, and it happens though. But no, I'm glad everything turned out okay. And now with the topic of your second book, and I know we're going to backtrack a little bit because I know this is the second book in relation to this subject that we're going to talk about. We're talking about vampires. We're not talking about traditional vampire lore or myth. When did your interest in vampires first begin? And the second part of this question is, where does Proxima Centauri B come into play? Because I know it's a big question here, but we have time.
Well, I first became interested in vampires as far back as I could remember, probably middle school. I was always interested in the paranormal since I was like 4 years old, because that's when I discovered that I had empathic abilities to be happy about, say, a part of a house that my family had owned since the 1850s. And it was a part of the house that they were very proud of. And as a little kid, 4 years old, I'd get really smiles and happy when I was in that part of the house that had what I used to call the pretty wood that was like shiny, glossy wainscoting, which actually shows the grain of the wood. It wasn't like my parents' house that was built in the early 60s or late 50s that everything was painted white. So, but anyway, when I was in middle school, there was a British sitcom on in the afternoons when I got home from school, and it was called Dark Shadows. And it was all about a vampire. At first, it branched out into other areas, but Barnabas Collins was the vampire. And he was kind of like a hero to me. Most little kids or most young kids, pre-teenagers, they either like Batman or Superman or whatever. And I liked Barnabas Collins. He was like my superhero. So I had thought about that ever since I was in middle school. How does a vampire do what they do? How do they transfer their thoughts and feelings directly into your brain, and also understand what you're thinking and feeling? And how do they, disappear into thin air? And how do they, shapeshift into other animals? So as I went on through school and took many courses in science and physics and chemistry, I more or less had a theoretical scientific reason why vampires do all these things. And that's what I actually put into my second book, but my first book about vampires, Vampires Dead or Alive. And I really, when it comes, each chapter is about a vampire's abilities. Say like the vampire's ability to shapeshift. And I'll explain why the vampire can shapeshift, how they shapeshift. And I'll also look at, is that more like a person who's alive or a person who's dead? And really, to be able to shapeshift really has nothing to do with a human being alive or being dead. So it'd be none of the above. But I look at how they can shape shift through bending space and time and going back to a time. I believe in reincarnation. So they go back to a time where they were, say, a coyote, and then they can shape shift and turn into a coyote because just their person, they bend time and space for just their physical body, so that they can go back to a time when they were a coyote, and then they instantaneously turn into a coyote. And it takes a lot of force and a lot of energy to do that. You'd almost have to have a very small, dense black hole that you could utilize, and I just think it's one of those groundbreaking books that no one else has ever talked about or ever tried to explain how a vampire do what they do. And I thought that should be something that everyone who's in paranormal would enjoy. So, now what was your second question?
No, I think you were getting right to that. Well, Proxima Centauri B, where is that located?
Okay, that's the second book. My theory is that vampires originally come from, maybe not all of them, but most of them came from Proxima Centauri B. And that was a planet that was discovered in 2016 by scientists. And it is, its host planet is Proxima Centauri. And that is a red dwarf. And the red dwarf planet, it's very close to the red dwarf planet, but it's still in the inhabitable zone where people could live. But they theorize that it's so close to the red dwarf planet that it's probably tidal locked with its host star, Proxima Centauri. So that means that its one day is approximately 1 year, because one side of the planet is always facing the star. So that side of the planet's going to be super hot, and the other side of the planet is going to be super cold. Kind of like the moon is tidal locked with Earth. One side of the moon is always facing Earth. So a day on the moon is going to be an Earth year, and a night on the moon is going to be a Earth year continuously. So that is my theory, and I try to back it up scientifically. I try to more or less set up a biosphere where vampires could live on Proxima Centauri B. And I just go through the day-to-day life, what they would need, anything from shelter. I think they mainly live in the cave system, just because of the severe hot or the severe cold would make it impossible to live on the surface. And I also feel that, with the living underground, they probably have a network of tunnels. They're probably very good on realizing you can't have too many tunnels close together or you're going to weaken your structure. So they're probably very good at geology and mining techniques. And they probably have underground rivers that they tap into. They have like water sources, underground lakes, or maybe even oceans that they utilize. So I try to go into the scientific end of this. It's a theoretical biosphere on Proxima Centauri B. And who knows, someday, the more we learn about Proxima Centauri B, I might be more right than wrong. And but there's no way of really knowing. So it's kind of hypothetical, but at the same time, that's my hypothesis that I'm setting forth to explain how the vampires live on this planet and what type of life they have. Living in the cave, I'm sure they have all types of artificial light so that their eyes can still function properly, because most cave animals live in total darkness and usually don't have sight, but have the ability to feel thermally, kind of like my thermal camera looks at something and gives you a color code for how hot or how cold it is. Most animals can feel heat and cold sensors instead of being able to visualize you. They know you're there because they feel your heat. So I look at many aspects of the vampire's life on Proxima Centauri, and I got the third book and the second book about vampires is available on Amazon ebook, Kindle ebook, and Amazon is available both paperback and hardback. And the hardback has some really interesting photos where I theorize that they'll have a lot of really nice aurora borealis type situations like we have at the North Pole, because all of the a red dwarf gives off a lot of solar flares, and that puts a lot of charged ions into the atmosphere of Proxima Centauri B. And those ions that are charged just fill the sky with beautiful patterns of colors. So, and that's my theory. And we know that from what happens on Earth at the North Pole. So if you purchase the hardcover, you'll get to see those photos, which are pretty interesting.
I look forward to seeing those pictures, my friend. Now, with the evolution of these vampires, because we're talking Interstellar, and of course with vampires here on Earth, you talked about a black hole, maybe interdimensional. How do they get here? Differently than some UFO species, we actually use vehicles to come here. How do they get here on Earth? How do they evolve here on Earth from their home planet?
I think that they came in spacecrafts, and I think they're centuries ahead of us in technology. And vampires are very durable, and I think that they can go into like a hibernation state for maybe years. So if they get sick and tired of traveling in the spacecraft, they'll have some people on duty that have to be, awake, and the rest of them can go into like a suspended animation, like a hibernation, so that they can travel and it won't seem like, how many light years away. They're 4.2 light years away. So if they have a spacecraft that can travel almost the speed of light, it would take them 4.2 years to travel from Proxima Centauri B to Earth. So I think if any species can withstand the rigors of space travel, it'd be the vampires. And I really feel that they've probably been here maybe long before human beings appeared. And my theory is they probably manipulated our DNA so that they could actually interbreed with humans. Because some of our DNA is not seen anyplace else in other animals on Earth. So that's probably because the vampires actually manipulated our DNA. And even if we are from Mars, then they manipulated our DNA on Mars to make us more like them. And I think they wanted to interbreed with us so they would have offspring that would not have to avoid our star's sunlight. The sun would just de-ravel their DNA, which will kill them. So I think they wanted offspring that their DNA would not de-ravel. And if you notice, how many other animals on Earth get a sunburn or a suntan? We're the only animal on Earth that happens to. And that's probably because we have some vampire DNA within our, DNA.
That's very interesting because the minute you asked that question, I started to think all these animals pictures flashed in my brain. I was like, I don't think any of them can actually get a tan.
No.
Humans are the only, or some only human animals can. Now, in the spirit of humans and vampires, classic folklore has it where vampires usually feed on humans or they can feed on animals. to drain their blood or to generate other vampires, because they don't always kill. Eventually you bite a person, that person can potentially turn into a vampire. These species of vampires, were they involved in that type of behavior as far as feeding on humans, or in now in the spirit of developing humanity to be more like them, was it a case of them biting into a human, to use a generic term, and then passing that DNA to that next human to be more vampire-like?
Well, I'm not sure if you can pass um, DNA through a bite. You might be able to pass pathogens like maybe bacteria or something like that, or maybe even a fungus through a bite. But I don't think you can pass DNA through biting, even if you have puncturing teeth. And I don't think most vampires go around killing or drinking. They drink blood, but I don't think they, you know, do it as viciously as it's been portrayed in the past. I think they do drink blood. And the reason why they drink blood on their planet is they don't have to kill animals. Just think about it. If we could go out and drink some blood from a goat and from a chicken and then eat vegetables or something, we wouldn't have to kill a single animal. And on Proxima Centauri B, their animals don't multiply very quick. And their animals live like vampires forever. A vampire can be destroyed, but it doesn't have a definite death cycle. It can live, forever, possibly, but it can be destroyed. If a vampire is exposed to severe heat or fire or nuclear radiation, or a bomb explodes and the vampire is close by, that will destroy a vampire. But a lot of the plants on Proxima Centauri B, they're like vampires. They live forever. They don't have a definite lifespan, and it's blurred. The animal and plant kingdom is kind of like one and the same. Animals have both the ability to photosynthesize food, and they also can get nutrients another way, kind of like a tree with roots. And their animals don't have a need for locomotion. They don't have to run fast like animals here have to run fast to avoid being ate by something else. So most of your animal and biological plants, which are all in the same, I call them like the warm-blooded, cold-blooded animals. They're stationary. They just stay in one spot all their life unless somebody physically moves them, like we would dig up a tree and move it. And I think a lot of these animals have an outer covering, like say a cat or a dog would have hair. Mm-hmm. And if your cat's or dog's hair gets too long, you could trim it. Well, I think the vampires can trim the outer covering of these biological plant animal type stationary beings or species, and then soak that whatever the outer covering is, whether it's like a shingle off of a roof or hair like a dog's hair, or even maybe like a scales or something. They can take that off without harming the plant animal type species, and then they can like soak it in water and drink it more like a blood tea. And I think there's red blood cells in these animals, or plant type animal mixture. There's red blood cells in their outer layer that the vampires can take off. And I think that their outer layer probably is more nutritional in their blood. Our blood is not that nutritional. So I think on Alpha Centauri B, vampires don't have to drink a whole lot of blood to get their daily allowance of what they really need to survive. And here, vampire bats in South American caves, a lot of times they'll starve to death because they don't get enough blood to keep them from starving to death. And it just shows you that blood on Earth is not that nutritional You need a lot of it to stay alive. And, these poor little bats, there was some research group from, I think, New Zealand that it did research. The name is in my book. And they did the second book. They did research on what the difference was between the fruit and bug eating bats versus the vampire bats who only drink blood. And the vampire bats don't bite anybody. They just scratch the surface of like a cattle or whatever, elk, and then they just sip on the blood. So, and they usually do it when the big animal doesn't even realize it. So the big animal doesn't even realize it's being, bitten on. It's that subtle. So, but they saw that the difference between the DNA allowed a vampire bat to be able to drink blood without having to taste the strong iron taste, that blood is just full of iron. And they also found out that there were either changes in the DNA or missing DNA, which allowed the vampire bat not to be able to have the taste receptors to find iron to be, horrible and not good tasting. And also the vampire bats had a lining to their intestines within their stomach, which would actually filter out the iron within the blood that they were drinking, that the fruit and bug eating bats did not have. And that would allow them to dismiss the iron through number 2 on a regular basis. And if you get too much iron in your system, it would kill a bat. So they have to filter that out, and they do. And I'm sure vampires have the same abilities, especially if they're drinking human blood on Earth. Now, blood might be a little bit different on Proxima Centauri B, because here, air blood to bond with oxygen has hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin molecule is more or less has iron in it that bonds with our oxygen. So, there might be different blood on Proxima Centauri B where iron is not the molecule that bonds with oxygen. And if that be so, then maybe some of the vampires don't have to have a special lining to their stomach that filters out the iron that they drink, or when they drink blood.
So, very interesting because you mentioned the feeding difference between their home planet and ours. Could it be then, since they were able to live almost forever on their planet, once they came on Earth, did the aging process begin? Because kind of Earth is a little more polluted, I would assume, than their planet.
I don't think the aging process has anything to do with Earth. I think it has to do with the biological animal or biological species. So no matter where they're at in the universe, they still won't age. And that's the reason why vampires have to move away, because if they stay in one spot too long, you would say, well, God, that guy looked 50 when I was 5, and now I'm 65 and I look older than he does. They can't live in the same spot too long. It'd be a dead giveaway. They have to move to either a different country or a different location and start over as somebody else. That might be rough to do in the United States, since you have the Social Security cards and you have the fingerprinting and all, because you're going to have the same fingerprinting as that guy that died 200 years ago. If they still, now such a thing, a country would only probably keep a dead person's fingerprints on file for so long, and then they'll probably get rid of them. So then you can reappear in that country if you know that for sure. Never get in any problems with the law, but there's different reasons why you can be fingerprinted. When I went for my secret clearances, I had to be fingerprinted. So there's different reasons why a person can be fingerprinted and not really, break the law. So a vampire would have to avoid that. Otherwise, it'd be a dead giveaway. If your fingerprint's not in the system, then you can kill yourself off and reappear someplace else very easily.
Yeah, I guess you can do that. I think there was a famous singer from the 80s whose husband faked her own death. I don't know why that came up, but we won't talk about that right now. But I think he eventually popped up 30 years later. I don't know how
Oh,
he did
I,
that, but that's a whole different
I didn't I
show.
didn't know who that was.
Well, I'll tell you
Somebody said Elvis
offline.
Presley did the same thing.
You know, I believe that part though. I'm not gonna lie to you. But now, not to give away any more about the second book. Now that you're done with this book, it's been released now here in the last few months. Are you going to continue writing about vampires, or are you going to veer off to something different?
I don't know. Right now, I'm thinking about trying to publish on Smashwords and Barnes and Noble because I hear that they have a free publishing service. So I'm thinking about that. I'm also working on my equipment to try to do uh, more paranormal research. I'm having problems with my older camcorder, which I mean older, 2018, 2019, and trying to download the photos. It seems like with the newer computers, you have to get a special, I think it's DC MI cord so that you can download directly onto your laptop and be able to save it directly from the camcorder. Otherwise, you can look at it, you can view it, but you can't save it. So I've been working on all that. So if I do get a chance to go to a live location and do paranormal research, I'll be able to use, my video from my camera, cell phone, and also my camcorder, and also I have a uh, infrared camera. So I'm trying to get all that up to par, and every time they do updates with the computer, something changes, and then you got to figure out another way to save your um, information. Unless you want to buy a whole lot of SD cards, you need to be able to download the information off the SD card so you can have it empty to be able to reuse it again. And I would definitely like to work on another book. Uh, right now, I'm kind of leaning towards a place that I had completed paranormal research in 2020, and that was in St. Augustine. The owners had called the three-story townhouse the 1880 Victorian. So I would like to write a book about that. That was very interesting and had some unique paranormal experiences that I hadn't had in other locations. So that would be probably my next, but you never can tell. I wasn't going to write a book in 2025. I didn't really have any ideals. And then in July, somehow Planet of the Vampires kicked in. And, I wrote a chapter every day for like maybe 3 or 4 weeks. And then quickly after that, published it. So it was published in early September, I think maybe the 10th or 9th of September. So I wasn't even planning that. It just kind of came to me. So who knows what's going to happen in between time. I like to work on it all at the same time, but sometimes life happens in between, and before you know it, the week's gone, and you haven't worked on what you would like to work on as much as you would have liked to. So time goes fast.
It sure does, my friend. And when you eventually release the next book, I'd like to invite you back on the show. We'll definitely talk about it. And now I know you mentioned it earlier for our friends, the listeners of Let's Find Out, that want to learn more about you, your books, and where you're going to be next. Where can they find out?
Well, right now, my first book, The Hayes House Ghost for People 2, is only available ebook on Kindle. And my second book, Vampires Dead or Alive, is available ebook on Kindle and Amazon paperback. And my third book, Planet of the Vampires, is available ebook on Kindle and paperback and hardback on Amazon. And I'm also available on my YouTube channel. It's called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans. And I've been putting my paranormal short sessions and my promos on there and my extras on there for about maybe since 2021, April of 2021. In fact, I might have some of the footage from the 1880 on there, if I remember correctly. So it might go back to the 2020 as far as some of the older footage, at least the oldest footage. So anyway, you can check that out. It's free to subscribe to my YouTube channel called Paranormal Short Sessions by Keith Evans.
Awesome. And I'll put all the links to your sites and for your books on the show description once the episode is released. Keith, my friend, thank you for coming back on Let's Find Out. I look forward to having you back, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend.
Copyright Diego the Podcaster. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out with Diego is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.